Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do something a little different. I'm always looking around for new tour ideas or ideas for future trips I might take, and I was looking at this one website when I came across a tour that kind of caught my attention. It's called the U.S. National Parks Tour, and it's 11 days long. Naturally, I'm very curious to see how they're going to fit all of the national parks into 11 days. There are a lot of national parks in the United States. The tour mainly focuses on the national parks in Utah and northern Arizona. So here's the itinerary according to this tour company. They have you flying into Salt Lake City, spending one night in Salt Lake City. Then they have you going down to Moab, spending 2 nights in Moab with a day trip to Arches National Park. Then they have you driving to Kanab with a drive-through stop at Bryce National Park. And then you spend 2 nights in Kanab with a day trip to Zion National Park. Then they have you traveling to Las Vegas, spending 2 nights in Las Vegas with a day sightseeing in Las Vegas, before they have you driving to Flagstaff, 2 nights in Flagstaff with a day trip to the Grand Canyon before you spend 1 night in Phoenix before flying home. Now, if you've done this tour or have done something similar to this tour, that's great. This sounds like a really good tour. You're covering a lot of things in this tour. But as someone who's traveled to a lot of these places, I have some thoughts on it. If I was the one doing the itinerary, this is how I would do an 11 days trip to the U.S. National Parks of Utah and northern Arizona. For the purposes of this 11-day national parks tour, Salt Lake City is probably going to be the closest major airport to what you're trying to do. Personally, I would want to spend more time in Salt Lake City, but just for the purposes of doing an 11-day national parks trip, there's not really any national parks in the area, so 1 night in Salt Lake City would be sufficient. I do agree with their 2 nights in Moab and spending the whole day in Arches National Park. I was in Arches National Park when I was a kid. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I personally would love to spend a whole day exploring and hiking around in there. And besides that, Moab is just a beautiful area. So I do agree with 2 nights in the Moab area. I do agree with their 2 nights in Kanab. It is a really good jumping off point for visiting Bryce and Zion National Parks. For the purposes of the 11-day tour, I agree with 1 full day in Zion National Park. Personally, 1 full day doesn't feel like enough. I was there for 3 full days and there were still things I didn't get to do or see. So 1 day would definitely feel very rushed, but for the purposes of our 11-day trip, 1 day would be perfect. Now, I don't agree with the 2 nights in Las Vegas. I mean, it's very tempting to say Las Vegas is literally only 2 hours away from Zion. It's just a quick trip. Why not just go over there? I mean, that's what I did on my Zion trip. However, for the purposes of the national parks trip, Las Vegas is way out of the way from everything else you want to do. There's not really any national parks in the area, and there's better ways that you could use that time. So I would just not do the 2 nights in Vegas altogether. Instead of the 2 nights in Vegas, I would head straight down to Flagstaff, spend 2 nights in Flagstaff with a full day trip to the Grand Canyon. There are actually 3 visitor accessible rims of the Grand Canyon, and yes, I've been to all 3. South and North rims are the ones regulated by the National Park Service, and the West rim is regulated by the Indian Reservation. For the purpose of this tour, we're only going to go to South Rim. South Rim is definitely the more touristy side. That's where all of the historic lodges are. That's where all of the famous hiking trails are. It's easily accessible, only about an hour and a half from Flagstaff. That's where a lot of the tourists go, and that's where this tour has us going. 1 full day at the Grand Canyon should be sufficient. You have plenty of time to take all of your epic Grand Canyon shots, check out some of the historic lodges, grab a bite to eat. You should visit the Grand Canyon at least once in your life, and South Rim is a great option for that. Flagstaff is a great jumping off point for visiting the Grand Canyon, but there's a lot to do in Flagstaff as well. There's the Lowell Observatory where Pluto was discovered. There's hiking on Mount Humphreys, which is the tallest mountain in the state of Arizona. And there's hiking out in Walnut Canyon, which is really cool because the trail goes right through a bunch of Indian cliff dwellings. So for the purposes of this 11-day trip, I propose spending half a day to just explore Flagstaff. Check out downtown, check out the Lowell Observatory, maybe grab a hike before heading down to Sedona. Now, on the original tour itinerary, they have Sedona kind of wedged in as a stop on your way from Flagstaff to Phoenix. I don't agree with that. Sedona is one of my favorite places in the world. So on my 11-day national parks tour, I propose 2 nights with 1 full day in Sedona. I know it's only an hour south of Flagstaff, but trust me, it's so worth it. There's shopping in Uptown Sedona and in Tlaquepaque. There are a lot of local restaurants and cafes that are just so good. There's Chapel of the Holy Cross, which is a Catholic chapel that was built into the side of the Red Rock and has a stunning view of the valley. There's hiking up Bell Rock, Cathedral Rock, Devil's Bridge, and then down in Oak Creek Canyon. I highly recommend driving down into Oak Creek Canyon, north of Sedona, and going hiking on the West Fork Trail. It's in the canyon, so you've got a lot of shade, it's quiet, you're in nature, and there's ever-changing scenery. You've got the towering cliffs on one side, and then you've got apple orchards and fields of ferns, and you cross the creek several times. There's actually a place where you can slide down a part of the creek. It's like a little roller coaster slide, and it's a lot less crowded than Slide Rock State Park, which is up the street. It's my favorite hiking trail up in Sedona. Whenever we go up there, we have to go on West Fork, so I highly recommend doing that. Honestly, Phoenix is only about an hour and a half south of Sedona, so depending on what time your flight is, you can easily leave Sedona in the morning, make it to Phoenix in time for lunch, and catch an afternoon or evening flight. If your only flight options out of Phoenix are early in the morning, then you can cut out that second night in Sedona, drive down to Phoenix, stay the night, and fly out the next morning. That is doable. But personally, I would try to do the 2 full nights in Sedona if possible. Future me editing this, apparently I can't do math because you have plenty of time to spend a night in Phoenix before flying home, even with the 2 nights in Sedona. So spend the 2 nights in Sedona and then spend a night in Phoenix before flying home. All of that fits into 11 days. I'll show that later in the video. And that is how I would spend 11 days in the national parks of southern Utah and northern Arizona. Now, if you have more than 11 days to spend in these areas, here are some suggestions for you. Spend more time in Zion National Park. There are tons of hiking trails, tons of scenery. I was there for 3 full days and still didn't get to see and do everything, so more time in Zion is never a bad thing. Other ideas include spend more time in Flagstaff, go to the Lowell Observatory, take a hike out at Walnut Canyon or up on Mount Humphreys. There's a lot to see in that area. Or if you're looking for a good day trip option, Winslow is only about an hour east of there. Winslow is a ghost town made popular by the Eagles song Take It Easy, and there is a corner where you can stand on the corner of Winslow, Arizona with the head singer and his guitar. It's very small, very touristy, but there is a random 9/11 memorial right outside town. It's very small, very moving, with some pieces of wreckage from the actual towers. So if you have a chance to go to Winslow, stand on the corner, and visit the 9/11 memorial. Other stops you can make along the way, between Kanab and Flagstaff, I would stop in Page and take a tour of Antelope Canyon. Due to safety hazards, you can only access Antelope Canyon on a designated tour, but there are so many companies in Page that specifically do these tours, so it's very easy to jump on one of these tours. I would recommend leaving Kanab in the morning so that you can plan to take a tour of Antelope Canyon around 10 or 11. You want to do it before lunch because the road down into the canyon is very bumpy, and if you've just eaten a big heavy meal, that can end badly. So go take the tour and then get a later lunch before heading on to Flagstaff. And if you have even more time, then head on over to Kayenta and visit Monument Valley. It's not technically a national park because it's on the Navajo reservation, but it is definitely worth visiting, and Kayenta itself is a really good place to kind of experience Navajo culture. They've got a Hogan museum there, and right next to that is a Burger King. And the only reason I would tell you to go to this random Burger King in Kayenta, Arizona is because it has a really nice display about the Navajo code talkers who helped develop the unbreakable Navajo code during World War II. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this video was helpful for you in your travel planning. Please note that these are all just my suggestions based on my traveling experience. There are plenty of other things to do in Utah and northern Arizona. Feel free to explore, do your own research, plan your own trip, and let me know in the comments if this sort of video is helpful. Bye for now.